We're going to look at some ideas now for using Visualiser in maths. There is also a video on using Visualiser in English, and in a similar way, this is a bit of a buffet of ideas where you can just pick any ideas that you think might work in your classroom and with the resources you already have. Because the main thing for me about Visualisers is being able to use your concrete resources, which A, saves workload of trying to make a PowerPoint or Active Inspire or Smart Notebook of the same information, and also means that you're able to be versatile and flexible with your visualizer, kind of jumping to resources that you already have when you've got a spare 5 minutes, or if in the lesson you notice things aren't going to plan and some children need a bit more help, you're able to use the resources you've got all around you. So one example for me of a resource that I always have around and I can always kind of use for a couple of minutes with year 4, 5 and 6 to practice times tables is this. So I have these cards that I just got from a pound shop, and I just put one underneath, lay it down or hold it up, and just say, okay, how many different ways can we make 84? And then on the back I've got the answers. So easy enough thing to do without the cards, but by just having this £1 pack of cards, I'm able to quickly go to this whenever I've got a spare minute. So again, use number 80 and then see if they found the different ways to make it, and so on. And it's just something that you can always have to hand, and it means that you don't have to be prepared all the time for this bit of the lesson. You can just pick out the cards when you've got a spare minute, if they're queuing up waiting to go to lunch, or they're about to go home but you've got a few minutes left. It's just something you can pull out and use straight away. Similarly, if you've got dice around, you can always throw some dice and then see if they can do some different challenges with them. So depending on the year group and their abilities, you might say, can you add them all together? Can you times any of them? Can you divide any of them? Can you do any takeaways with them? Or can you make different sentences using each of those different operations? So you can set various challenges just by throwing the dice and writing a bit on the whiteboard. I always like to have a whiteboard underneath my visualizer. It just makes it really handy, and I find it much easier to then model writing onto there than I do to model writing onto the whiteboard, especially if it's not aligned perfectly all the time, as they often are not. So again, dice are really handy to have nearby, and there's so many different uses for them, of course, whether you're using them for probability or whether you're just doing some quick maths at the beginning of a lesson. And lots of the times you will be planning how you're going to model with your maths resources, but also you might just look around and think, right, what have I actually got in the classroom that's getting a bit dusty, and actually under the visualizer can have a new lease of life, because it's a bit hard to do these things in other ways sometimes. Another physical resource that's really useful for putting under the visualizer is something like a clock. Now this is just my my toddler's one, so lots of farm animals as well, but being able to do a clock underneath here is obviously a really easy way versus trying to do some. You can get kind of digital clocks and things that you can put on your whiteboard, but again, it takes searching for them, a bit of planning, but you've no doubt got those kind of big plastic clocks somewhere around the classroom that you use. So being able to just get that physical resource and use it, rather than having to spend an hour making a PowerPoint or something that goes through the different stages of the clock, or trying to draw one on the whiteboard and rubbing it out and so on. So just a really easy way to do it. I love the Claire Seeley blog on the Third Space Learning blogs about teaching the time using post-it notes, where you lay it out as a number line to start with. So for teaching the hours, it's a brilliant blog if you look it up, by Claire Seeley, and it basically shows how you can help children to understand the hours, the hour hand as going through a number line, and then you turn the post-it notes into the kind of the circular clock from starting them off as a number line. So go and have a look at that if you haven't seen it, but that works really well under the visualizer. Being able to lay out those post-it notes and then turn them into the clock under the visualizer works really well as well. Another thing you can do is having these kind of physical blocks. Often we kind of use these concrete resources with the children, but we've often made some sort of smartboard resource or Active Inspire resource or something where we're showing a pictorial representation of them, but then they're going to use the concrete ones. And again, it takes a lot of time to kind of set up a lot of those, and if you suddenly realise you need more examples, then you might not have done enough on the slideshow. But if you're doing it in physical under the visualizer, you don't need to have those worries. So you'll have planned out obviously what you're going to do, But I might start this one off and do a lesson on ratio and say, okay, how many blue blocks have I got to how many red blocks? And then I'll get a child to come up and write down what my ratio is. And then we might talk about, okay, if I had 6 red blocks, how many blue blocks would that be? So putting some challenges up. And so you're modelling with the resources that then they're going to have on their table. And it just makes it a lot easier when you're modelling for them to see that concrete use of the concrete resources before they go to pictorial and then into the abstract. And you can do all of that because they're essentially getting a pictorial view, but they're seeing your hands manipulate the concrete resources, which is also much easier than trying to hold them all up in front of the class when you've got multiple things going on. So again with these, so same sorts of blocks, and I might ask what fractions we're representing. So that's 1 whole, and then I've got 2 halves, and then I've got 4 quarters, and then what if I take these yellow ones away? So then I've got 3 quarters of the whole, and so on. So again, it's just concrete resources that I already have, plus a little mini whiteboard that I've already got, and I'm able to do all of my modelling through that and show the children exactly how they're going to use the same blocks, so that when they go to the table, they've seen how you've used them to help you to work things out, and it just turns that modelling into something really, really concrete for them that they can carry on with. Same with base 10, so I might get some of my base 10 underneath and say, okay, so I've got 25 there, and I've got this here. So first of all, I'll ask them what's on each side, and so hopefully we'll come up with 25 and 26, and then I might ask them to partition. So then we might, okay, so let's put all the 10s over here, put all the 1s over here, and then so we will turn that into our, so we've now got 40 and we've got 11, and then what do they need to do? So hopefully somebody will come up and tell me we need to swap 10 of these for another 10. And so again, you see my handwriting is a bit messy because I'm at a bit of an angle here, but you'll see that there's just, again, I'm using concrete resources, being able to turn it into that abstract with them being able to see those steps along the way, and they can help me with them much more easily than if I'm just doing this on the whiteboard. Excuse me, I'll just line that back up again. I've got a twisty visualiser neck. So again, it's just concrete resources that you can use. Another thing is when you're using worksheets or you're doing a test or something like that, and you want to kind of explain to them what they're going to see when they get to their independent task. Often we try and hold worksheets up, don't we, and go, okay, this is what you're going to see, this is what I expect, but actually being able to put that under the visualizer and go and just explain the worksheet, say, okay, this is the questions, remember this is going to be using this that we talked about, this is what I expect here, I want to make sure that everyone explains this really well, remember we want good sentences that talk about the maths. So a chance to talk through the worksheet before they do it as well. And you might also want to do some live marking or having a look at something someone's done. So here I've got a filled in test, and we might want to then go through somebody's example and say, okay, how many marks? We've got 1 out of 2, so how could we got the 2 marks in this question? And that's something then you can talk through as a whole class. So it's just a really useful way of being able to use something you've already got. Now, if you're worried about putting kind of children's mistakes under here as opposed to just best practice, one thing you can do is fill in your own test while the children are doing it and make all the mistakes that they're commonly making, so that rather than picking on an individual child's work, then you've actually just shown your example, but you've made the mistakes that you want to highlight that you know lots of them have done, so any kind of misconceptions you're spotting as you go around the room. So those are lots of different ideas for using it in maths. As I say, a buffet of ideas, so only pick what do you think will be useful in your classroom. But I urge you to just have a look around your room and just see which physical resources you've already got that would make really simple use of your visualizer without much help, without much hassle, and might even reduce your workload of creating those in-depth PowerPoints and slideshows of different types that might take you an hour, when actually the physical resources might mean that you could save yourself the time on that and really just think about the modelling and building through the different steps of the modelling. There is another video on using a visualiser in English, another one on general use in other subjects, and also some videos on how to share your visualiser through Zoom, Teams or Google Meet so that you can use your visualiser for any children who are accessing the lesson from home, or if you're indeed from home and kind of beaming your lesson in to their homes or into school as well. So do check those out. Thank you.